A lot of fans might not realize this, but there's a good chance that Kiara and Kion weren't Simba's only children. In fact, there are a few other stories out there that suggest that Simba had a son named Kopa, who was eventually lost to him and thus never featured in any of the movies. Well, what if I told you that there's a chance that Kopa still had a connection to the Pride Lands through a potentially fateful encounter with Simba's other son, Kion? Before we get into how Kopa and Kion may have met though, it's important to understand who Kopa was and what his potential role was in Zira's banishment from the Pride Lands. You see, according to the book series The Lion King: Six New Adventures, Kopa, not Kiara, was Simba's firstborn child and the one that we actually saw at the very end of the first movie. Kopa was obviously replaced by Kiara in the second movie, but many fans seem to think that he's still out there and that the scene in The Lion King 2 is actually a totally different scene from the one at the end of the first movie. Regardless, for the sake of these theories, let's consider the idea that Kopa existed and was Simba's firstborn son. And it turns out the reason he never appeared in the second film is actually a really sad one. Now, there are technically two explanations as to where Kopa went. The first theory suggests that one day when Kopa was just a cub, Zira managed to catch him off guard and alone. Here, she took her opportunity to weaken Simba's hold on the Pride Lands and shockingly killed the heir to his kingdom. The next theory is very similar, but instead of Kopa being killed by Zira, he managed to escape much like Simba did in the first film. However, because Zira was a member of the Pride at that time, Kopa would have been afraid to return in case she tried to kill him again. That said, either way that this theory panned out, it suggested that Simba found out what Zira had done, which is ultimately what led to her and the other Outlanders being banished. Now, for the idea of Kion meeting Kopa at some point in his life to work, we're going to have to go with the idea that Kopa survived the attack from Zira and ran away out of fear from the Pride Lands. So what does that have to do with Kion exactly? Well, as you might remember from The Lion Guard, Kion eventually suffered a snake bite, and in order to find a cure for the venom, he needed to leave the Pride Lands. According to this theory, Kion ended up finding much more. As shown in The Lion Guard, Kion's journey took him and the other members of the Lion Guard to the Tree of Life, where he met another group of lions and a queen who ultimately healed him. So the answer to the question surrounding how Kopa and Kion could have possibly met is that it would have been during this time. Think about it. Kion spent many months outside of the Pride Lands, and if his lost elder brother was out there, this would be the time that he would meet him. So then what would happen if Kion ran into his long-lost older brother? There are actually three different theories that suggest three very different versions of the reunion between the two lions, and thankfully the first is the most positive, with Kopa having a pride of his own. You see, according to this theory, months into Kion's journey to find a cure with the rest of his Lion Guard crew, he was wandering through an unknown territory when he came across a lion in his pride. Kion knew that he was in this other pride's territory and therefore had to introduce himself to the king and assure him that he wasn't a threat to him or his family. As he approached, though, he was surprised to be met with a sense of familiarity. According to the theory, as Kion approached the lion, the leader of this new pride recognized the mark on his shoulder and knew that he was a member of the Lion Guard for the Pride Landers. The older lion introduced himself as Kopa, and as Kion explained that he was the son of King Simba, the two quickly realized that they were related. Kion would have been excited to meet his long-lost older brother, especially since no one in the Pride Lands knew what had happened to him. But what was even more exciting was the fact that, if this theory is true, Kopa clearly managed to survive on his own and even met and fell in love with a lioness whom he started a family with. Kopa and Kion likely would have shared many stories about their childhood spent apart from each other, and eventually, Kion would end up telling Kopa what brought him so far away from the Pride Lands in the first place. The theory continues by explaining that after Kopa learned of Kion's injury, he did everything that he could to help his brother find a cure, and eventually, they did. You see, this theory suggests that it was Kopa who led them to the Tree of Life, where Kion met the queen who saved his life. After finishing their search for Kion's cure, though, the young lion would get some relatively sad news. The theory suggests that Kion eventually asked Kopa if he and his family would ever consider returning to the Pride Lands, but got an answer he didn't expect. Kopa supposedly turned down the offer to return to his old home, not for any bad reason though. It's just that he had a family of his own now and a territory that belonged to him. Kopa couldn't just abandon that and leave it behind. Even though that's a bit sad to think about, the theory does have a positive ending. As Kion would have returned to the Pride Lands, there's a good chance that he told Simba that Kopa was still alive and thriving with a family of his own. I'm sure that news would have put both Simba and Nala's minds at ease. Now, that was a really solid theory, but do you think that we could have an even better ending to it? Well, according to the second theory, there's a chance that Kopa did end up back back at home with his family after meeting Kion in more dire circumstances. You see, much like in the Lion Guard and in the first theory, Kion was away from the Pride Lands on a search for the cure for his snakebite. After months of tirelessly searching for the cure, the young lion finally finds it at the Tree of Life. This was actually shown in the third season of the Lion Guard. What wasn't shown is what this theory suspects happened shortly after those events. As you know from the Lion Guard, Kion eventually returned to Pride Rock, where he discovered that there was a new Lion Guard that was being led by Vitani. Kion ultimately stepped down and decided to return to the Tree of Life, where he could act as the guard for them, and it was where he seemed to fit in better. However, according to this theory, while he was on his journey to the Tree of Life, he ran into a pale, sickly-looking lion by the name of Copa. Kion knew that he needed to help the lion, and when he got closer to him, Copa noticed the marking of the Lion Guard on his leg. Realizing that Kion was from the Pride Lands, Copa explained who he was and what had happened to him before everyone believed he had died. It's at this point that Kion would have realized that he was talking to his own brother, who his family thought was long gone. The theory continues with Kion telling Copa that he thinks they're related, and after having a brief reunion, Kion decides to bring his brother back to the Pride Lands where he belonged. If this theory is true, Simba and Nala would obviously be overjoyed to see their eldest son again, and Copa would finally meet his family, including his younger sister, Kiara, whom he hadn't met yet. He'd even get to meet Kovu by that point in the storyline, and awkwardly enough, there would have to be a new discussion about the heir to the Pride Lands. But that's a topic for a whole different theory and a different video. Now, it's nice to think that Copa got to return to the Pride Lands and live happily ever after with his family, but as you know, there are some dark fan theories out there. Can you see where this is going? In this final theory, Kion's reunion with Copa was less happy and much more antagonistic than some fans might think. You see, much like the last theory, it's set after Kion was cured of his snakebite and was on his way back to the Pride Lands. However, according to this theory, he and the rest of the guard got lost along the way and somehow wandered into uncharted territory. To make things even worse, they were slowly being surrounded by dozens of hungry hyenas that were just waiting to pounce. The guard continued to press forward, but eventually were surrounded, and by the time they realized it, it was too late. According to this theory, the hyenas didn't attack right away, though. Instead, their leader revealed themselves from behind a rock, and Kion was shocked to see that it was another lion. The strange lion introduced himself as Copa and let Kion know that he recognized the mark on his leg. Without saying anything else, the lion launched an attack at his younger brother, hoping to get revenge for what he perceived as being abandoned. When Copa attacked Kion, he didn't realize that he was the lion in control of the Roar of the Elders, but he quickly found out when the younger lion was forced to use it on him. Kion used the roar in self-defense, and because of that, he managed to get away. Now, here's where this theory is split. One school of thought is that Copa was merely injured and Kion returned home never to say a word about the incident to his family. The other is that Kion accidentally killed Copa with the roar, and again he opted out of telling his family about the attack. This theory is obviously much darker than the other two, but with as little as we know about Copa, it holds just as much weight as the happier theories. Which do you think was the more accurate theory, though? Did Copa start a family of his own, return to the Pride Lands, or turn his back on his family and choose a path of vengeance? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.